you're saying. Are you pointing to me, Mary, to have me welcome people?
No, I'll welcome, but oh, thanks, Mamadi. All right, so welcome everyone to AMA number 35, the 26th of February. Introductions, Art Brock, co-founder of Holo and Holochain. Mary Camacho, executive director, Holo and Holochain, and myself, David Atkinson, the commercial director. So some quick thank yous and announcements before we get into it. So we've been heads down since the last AMA, fixing bugs, building infrastructure, supporting developer growth, and getting hApps internal and external onto Holoscape. Some big highlights of the last period is having the approval of the Cryptographic Autonomy license, having 850 holoports registered on our hosting network, having 200 plus signups and about 60 completions to our latest community-run dev camp or developer camp. We have approximately 20 upcoming events on the calendar over the next 2 months, including a hackathon or hackathon in New York City and in Seattle, and more details will come out about those over the coming days. And a quick shout out, I think there's a lot of conversation in some of the channels, but for those of you lurking or active on Telegram or on our forums that don't quite know how to get involved, we just want you to get involved. Start building a app, start trying to design a business, start connecting and collaborating with other people, and see how you and all of us can work together to build the future. And a huge thanks and shout out to everyone who's already on that journey and part of our ecosystem. So let's jump straight into the Cryptographic Autonomy license with a question for Mary here. So firstly, Mary, congratulations for the first open source license designed for decentralized software. Implicit in the question is, can you tell us a little bit more about this license and then what's next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So yeah, the Cryptographic Autonomy license, it's a new software license that was just this month approved by the Open Source Initiative. And what's really interesting is that the OSI, they're very careful not to approve too many licenses. They really want to make things easy for developers who are looking to, for a license that is best to use for their open source project. And so they want to keep the proliferation of new licenses to a minimum. But with the CAL, what it is that technology has shifted, and the need for something that is appropriate to the technology for decentralized applications had just hit the point. And we wrote, or just being a part of this team to get this draft and get this license approved was super exciting, because this is the first time, this really marks the first time in an open source license, probably, I don't know if any license, but that it actually protects the rights of the end users. And Arthur, maybe you can go into a little more detail and let people understand why it really matters.
Yeah, certainly some people are still trying to understand why it matters. And I think that the simplest example, because we use in the license, there's this term about user data that ensures that they have access to and they in control of their own user data. And that's a general term. But I think the clearest example of it is private keys. Private keys are a special type of data. In decentralized cryptographic systems, they essentially control identity and validation of source of things and authorization of things and all that kind of stuff is being able to sign or encrypt using your private keys, or decrypt using your private keys. And so if you think about it this way, if someone uses Holochain to publish a distributed app, call it messaging or a social network or maybe a currency, it actually would not be a legal use of Holochain to have that app generate users' private keys in any way except such that they have sole control of them. In other words, if they used like a master seed to generate keys so that they actually they would actually have the private keys that people had and could take control over the user's systems basically at any time or act on as if that user, like spend their currency, for example, that would actually be an illegal use of Holochain. That is not using Holochain in accordance with our license, right? And there's no other licenses that provide those kinds of end user protections. And given decentralized systems and the way things like private keys work nowadays, it just seems like you need to have that kind of a new kind of model for decentralized systems like that.
Super, thanks, Art. And it's so nice to be part of a team that's thinking about the broader ecosystem, not just the technology, and how to support and empower users in that. So I'm looking forward to seeing the various uses of the license out in the wild. All right, next question. Ooh, I've been muted and unmuted. Okay. So will it be possible for Holo hosts to read the private data of the agents they are hosting? Or is there a way to encrypt private entries with the agent's private key, thereby making the data inaccessible to the host? So this has been a big question that's been doing the rounds on various social channels over the last couple of weeks. So Art.
Sorry, I'm double muted here. So I have posted some answers to this in the Holochain forum because there's been a little bit of FUD making the rounds about private data and stuff. And I think we first need to do a little bit of a reality check on hosted data, like what that actually means, because we can't count on end users, web users, to hold anything. A web user should be able to basically reformat their hard drive and install an operating system in a browser, and then they expect to be able to reach their stuff on the web again. So they can wipe their whole system or just walk to another system and open a browser on another machine, and they expect to be able to get to everything. So we can't actually count on end users holding anything, whether public or private information. And so the hosts, the way Holochain works is that users have a source chain for everything that they author. And some entries on that source chain are public, which means they replicate over the DHT to a shared space. And some entries are private, which means they do not replicate and they are not by default visible over the public DHT space. But hosts have to be able to act as if they're that user in certain ways. Now, they don't have the user's private keys. They can't sign new things. They can't take new actions on behalf of that user. But one of the ways that Holochain's privacy model works or security model works is actually with cryptographic capabilities tokens, grants and claims that we save as private entries. So I could, for example, save some private information to my chain that I then want to explicitly give somebody permission to access. And I create a capabilities grant as another private entry that is basically the statement that I will share this private entry with this person when they request it, but only when they request it. And hosts actually still need to be able to perform those actions. So they have to be able to read those types of private entries, the ones that are granting permissions and such. So we can't by default just encrypt all private entries. But when you're creating an application that has any kind of sensitive data, you can say what types of entries you might want to encrypt, right? Whether those are private or public, you can still encrypt things on an entry by entry basis. So I think this is just the reality of hosted systems, that you as the app developer have to know what data is sensitive and then actually set that up to be encrypted. In the native use of Holochain scenario, we already provide the secure option because you self-host, right? And what we're trying to serve with Holo hosting is a broader market of people who aren't ready to self-host. They may not have that same kind of level of privacy concern that they want to be the only ones to hold their data. They're already used to turning data over to web providers. And just realistically, when you turn data over to web providers, you don't really know who you're turning it all over to. There's all kinds of people in that chain, advertisers and people who end up with access to your data. And so just want to say that in the Holo example, the whole source chain public and private entries are being stored, and it has to work that way because we have to be able to serve all those things out in the clear. There's no, just the physics of encryption, the way that they work is that you can't have a host be in a position where it has to serve something out in the clear or be able to understand something if it can't read it itself, right? So the hosts have to be able to read the data. When I say the hosts, I mean the software on the hosts. Now, we can have that data encrypted at rest, make it harder for just prying eyes to just go like browsing in the hard disk and that kind of stuff. And hosts don't know who they're hosting, and they frankly probably won't be hosting that many people. So you're hosting a dozen users of this app and a dozen users of that app, and it just doesn't make the same kind of honeypot target that you get out of having 700 million users' data that somebody wants to go and attack and find the data from. So anyway, that's the answer. The short version is just, if you don't want anyone to access your data, host yourself on Holochain. If you want specific app data to be private, make sure that those entries are encrypted. I think one other note, sorry, is just that hosts are under a contractual agreement with Holo, just like any hosting service provider. They're subject to the confidentiality restrictions and that kind of stuff of any service provider. It may seem harder to enforce, but then again, it also may be easier to enforce because they can't afford armies of lawyers to defend themselves or whatever, right? Like, hard to know exactly how that one plays out, but this isn't just kind of a wild frontier. There is actually a contractual relationship.
Great, thank you, Art. So something else that's happened between the last AMA today is that we announced that with our Sim2H, we'd hit the 5,000 nodes benchmark for our networking. And this question's asking, so with this 5,000 nodes threshold benchmarking being hit, where they can all talk, so all these nodes can talk simultaneously in a single app environment or application environment, what is holding back the testnet with HoloFuel, right? Also, when can we expect this to be launched for public HoloPort owners? So Mary, I'm sure a lot of people have been asking about this and the roadmap. So can I hand this over to you?
You bet. All right. So definitely, I think one of the most consistent questions we've been receiving in the last few weeks has been when's the roadmap coming out and what can we expect? So today we're actually putting out our new roadmap. So we're going to display it up on the screen here during the AMA. So this is the first view publicly of the roadmap. A couple people have been reviewing it this week to kind of get some feedback, but we're going to be placing it on our website after the AMA. So this is your chance to get ahead of everybody. I think we'll get it up on the screen soon. Yeah, go ahead and go share the screen. They don't need to look at me for this. And I'll talk a little bit through it. So great, here we go. Beautiful. All right. So as you can see in this diagram, there is a ton going on. There's just a lot that we're working on. Whereas in the past, we've tried to sort of explain all of that complexity by showing you architecture diagrams or giving you the phases of test. This year, we're really shifting into a release cycle, and we are going to be using this evolving product roadmap to share all of the work that we're doing in development and what's coming. I want to point out a couple of really important aspects of the roadmap. First thing, it's not a schedule. There aren't dates on here. It's a map. And that means depending on who you are, you will probably be looking at it differently. Because, for instance, if you are brand new to Holochain and are a developer, you will probably pay more attention to things like the RAD tools that are down in the third swim lane down below. Whereas if you're already a ways into your application development with Holochain, you might be focusing more on, well, what's coming next in feature capabilities in Holochain. That's in the center swim lane in the green. Or you might be interested in some of the core apps. So in Holo, we're an agile development organization. And so our roadmap is also agile. We're going to be keeping this updated for you between now and the beta release. What's really important to notice here is that there's a little window that you can see on the map on the left-hand side. And what that reflects on the website, that's actually going to be a link, and you'll be able to kind of pop up some extra details about all of the upcoming releases, the milestones that we're actually working on right now and preparing for release. And this is across all of the dev teams and all of the products. So I want to talk a little bit about what some of those upcoming ones are. That release window, or that sort of window that you can see on the roadmap, it reflects what we know is coming, because when you're working in agile, you work in sprints. Our sprints are 2 weeks long, and usually we can see out several sprints in detail to know approximately what's coming up in the next 6 weeks or so. So that's a little bit how you can read it. But I will say that the rest of the map is not to scale, so don't interpret that too literally, please. But anyway, what you'll notice, there's a couple of things I want to point out that are coming up that people may or may not know what they are. You'll be able to read about this when you see it on the website later. But the first one is sorted links. This one is on the Holochain feature capabilities thread or theme. This is basically a feature in Holochain that allows app developers to retrieve lists of data that are sorted by the date of an author's timestamp. For the efficiency of message sizes and node workloads, these links are going to be returned in pages that are approximately 50 by default. And Arthur, do you want to say something about this? Because I know this has been something really important for us in the use of Holochain, or I'm sorry, in the development of HoloFuel, and also in the work with communities as we've been testing.
Yeah, I mean, in part, it's also just to place appropriate network loads on people. When you make a request for links, you don't want to put a load on a node where it suddenly has to assemble 1 million links to you. If you have built your app in such a way that you might end up having 1 million links on a single node, which we would also discourage, but certainly that could happen. But that so that you just basically get them in bite-sized chunks. And so much of software, especially web app software, is used to doing that these days now, where you have kind of the infinite scroll, but you get the next chunk of things and load them up, and then you get the next chunk of things if you actually go that far. So it's along the lines of that kind of philosophy. And the other thing about it is that the default is to serve the newest ones first, because typically you're probably getting a request. You're probably making a request for what are the newest links, right? And so that's just the default behavior.
Right. And you can think of links like transactions. I mean, for us, when we're building HoloFuel a little bit, we're seeing basically the different transactions in HoloFuel and having those sort order of those. Maybe I'm saying something wrong, Arthur. You're looking at me funny.
I think of links as transactions across all apps.
No.
It's
right.
just, it's like it would be if it was Twitter, it would be like, who are my followers? And you have links to the followers, or links to my posts, or links to who I'm following, or like the
list
links.
Data.
It's lists, it's collections of data. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Oops. So let's keep going through this list. So another one that's on there that people may not recognize is create hApp, and it's under the rad tools arrow line. And this one is new, and one of the things we know is going to be really critical in getting our app developer community really kind of having access to get started with Holochain is that they have ways to start quickly and easily when they're brand new to Holochain. So create hApp is a command line tool that basically goes and instantiates a fully functional notes application from just a few simple commands. If you've ever worked with React, or a library like that, it's similar to the Create React app, where developers can get an instant running setup without having to go build a lot of configuration. So it speeds things up and gets you started. So that's coming out soon. And then what I know a lot of people are asking about in particular is, when are we going to open up the HoloPort admin for the hosts that are that just got registered on their HoloPorts. So that's definitely coming too. We've got this in QA right now, and basically we're going back and forth with some of the testing between all of the integration that's happening on new releases of Holochain the builds and releases that are happening with the HoloPort as we've been doing some fixed releases, and then each of the app DNAs and UIs that are being built. So that's being tested right now. We've been getting that through, and our QA team's been on it. So as soon as we have that in the state that we're ready to do release, you'll be seeing that released out to the hosts. Now remember, right now, the hosts are that are registered, that have purchased a HoloPort, are the only people who can test HoloPort and HoloPort admin. So what that means is that hosts will be able to get to the HoloPort admin, and then they'll also be able to access the test fuel app, which is the HoloFuel app with test fuel. And then another milestone that's on there that I know a lot of folks are waiting for is the more broadly based app hosting. And this is where we're going to be demonstrating really holo hosting end-to-end, where Holochain apps can be configured by hosts in the HoloPort admin dashboard, and then subsequently regular web users will be able to access those apps from a web browser. And at that point, people via web browsers will be able to use the HoloFuel app with test fuel, and the communities app will come following that one. So those are all the parts, those are all the milestones and releases that are going to be coming out in the next 6 weeks approximately, where we'll be giving updates on the Holo forum, on the Holochain forum, and in all of our regular announcements as we prepare to launch those. Great.
Super, thanks, Barry. And for those of you who sort of asked for more behind the scenes look of what goes on in our world, you got a few seconds of Art and Mary disagreeing there. And I mean, you're more than welcome to direct message any of us and also join other meetings where we disagree or agree on things. So it's pretty exciting. All right, switching gears slightly, because I think we've gone for those 3 really important questions, taken a little while, so rattle through some more now. First one is, what are the top 3 most exciting things the community should expect for 2020? Firstly, the roadmap being delivered, HoloFuel in beta, super exciting. Getting hApps hosted in the App Store, and our goal of having 100 hApps hosted in the App Store, powered by the amazing developer community and builder community. The RAD tools I'm really excited about, just having a fantastic developer experience. But I think the 4th is my sort of standard response to that, which is it's the awesome things that are being built on Holochain that the core team couldn't imagine. And more importantly, that all of you out there who are seeing the possibilities of building the project or the business or the solution that you've always wanted to, and Holochain's part of that answer, that all you guys become the star. That's the most exciting thing, I think, for the community to expect, that there's opportunities to build livelihoods, build visibility, and build something that you passionately believe in on this tech and through the ecosystem we're growing. So that's my most exciting thing. Unless any of you guys want to jump in and answer, I'll move to the next one. All right. Okay, so the timing's now. Mary, can you give us your best guess as to when Open Alpha will start and when Beta will start? And please elaborate as much as possible.
Sure. Well, with the new roadmap, you might notice that we didn't use the phases of test like closed or Open Alpha. And in part, this is because those terms we realized when we started putting together all of what we're doing and all of the different products that are being built and dev teams that are working on these things, is that those terms just don't apply across all of it. We are releasing Holochain, for example. We are releasing dev RAD tools for developers. And only a small portion of what we're building, or a portion of what we're building, is in a closed alpha stage at this point in time. And the reality is that once we get the hosted hApps on HoloPorts, even part of that becomes open, whether or not we mean for it to, because anybody will be able to access the hApps directly from a web browser. So those terms are just not as useful as they seemed when we first started using them. So we're adjusting that. And what we're really moving towards is trying to get a lot more detail about upcoming releases and having people be clear across all of the work that's being done, what's coming out when. We are releasing things regularly at this point, whether it's a Holochain, a new Holochain release, whether it's a RAD tool that's coming out, or whether it's an update or feature on the Holo network. These things will be consistently happening, whether it's every 2 weeks or once a month. We don't have an exact sort of cadence in mind at this point, but it's regular. And so we'll keep everybody up to date on all of our communication channels, so it should be really easy to follow.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in really briefly also about one of the hurdles involved in really bringing community apps online is making sure we have an appropriate scalability testing pipeline for those apps. So one of the things that we've been working on is this final exam test. It's interesting, somebody noted somewhere that they feel like our activity levels have been low. And one of the problems is that a lot of our activity levels are in some repos that are not visible at the moment. We've been working a lot on our testing pipeline, and we haven't opened up that pipeline publicly yet, although we are very close, actually. We have parts of that queuing tested right now. And we're even looking at the possibility of using HoloPorts for being able to do some of this scalability testing for people. And so anyway, that's one of the kind of tooling pieces that is also a delay in really being able to launch apps, because we don't want apps, untested apps that haven't been scaled to bog the system down. So we have to actually do a little bit of quality control on the scaling.
Great, thanks, Art. Another one for you here about Holochain application performance. So do we have any edge server technology / principles in place to ensure that Holochain apps performance across the globe is strong?
Yeah, totally. You know, I have to say that because we expect a bunch of Holo host devices to be, you know, sitting in people's houses and offices and those kinds of things, so therefore you're getting an upload speed that may not be as fast as some of the things that you are used to sitting on, like data center backbones. We've felt it's very important to do some careful balancing around that, like to keep static assets actually in the cloud, in the edge, in CDN, content delivery networks, like Cloudflare in particular is who we've partnered with, but also we've worked with Cloudflare to have the time from basically opening an app in a browser kind of thing to hitting the host to be as short as possible. Cloudflare has the fastest DNS resolution times by far over any other network, like up to 8 or 10 times faster than some of the other ones, even like Google. Also, they have this thing called service workers, which let us run little scripts and processes on Cloudflare's servers throughout their edge network. And that's where we actually have the process of resolving an application and matchmaking the person to a host. So in other words, the process of getting connected to the host is as fast as we can make it, wherever you are in the globe, because Cloudflare has these hundreds of data centers all over the globe running these edge pieces, right? And where we haven't gotten to is sort of the levels of optimization of doing like local or regional peering based on latency, because we're just not ready yet for that level of optimization. We need to actually see what the performance is like, where you're kind of getting matched to a random host, and that host may not be the closest to you, but at least you got there quickly and can expect responses quickly and not have to move lots of heavy assets, because we're moving those heavy assets already to the content delivery network. So that's the ways that we are optimizing for global performance right now.
Super, thank you, Art. And Art sort of touched on this, but I want to just stick with this question, as it's come up to me a lot over the last 2 or 3 weeks. We have a lot of people across our network who actively track our development activity through the reports we make available and through reports in the broader crypto network that make visible activity across projects. And Holo development teams being consistently in the top 1 or 2 projects over the last 6-12 months, and then that's dropped off. So they're over January and February. The specific question says like that January activity has been the lowest over the past 20 months, the lowest it's been in the last 20 months, and February looks like it's on pace for the second lightest. And the question's like, well, what's the team's take on this? Is it likely that this is the new normal pace after the reset? Is this a result of current technical hurdles being faced developing lib3h, or something else entirely? So I'd love, Mary, you can let us know what's going on.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about it. There's a couple different questions in there that are pretty great. One is, I don't actually see that there's much of a dip really for what the activity level is in our development teams right now. In January, the type of work changed significantly. We were doing a lot of integration release work in January, a lot of small fix work. A lot of it was on the Nix packages. I mean, if you go look in the details, you can go find where that was. But we were also doing a lot of testing, and a bunch of the work, as Arthur was pointing to earlier around testing, doesn't necessarily show up in basically in our GitHub development. It shows up in other places. So I want to say one other thing, and that is we haven't gone back and looked at these the scripts that pull everything from GitHub into our reports. I know when we first set them up, they were not exactly fully automated, and we'd find repos not showing up in there or not being counted in there. I know we've added quite a few new repos. There's a good chance we haven't gone back and checked those to make sure that all the stats are pulling in. So that's something we'll take a look at. Again, we've been automating this last month, and now that we're in February, we've actually gotten into a regular cadence of development work, and I don't think it's going to be lower than it was. I don't think with the reset, when we did a reset with Holo, we actually didn't significantly change the number of developers that are working for us. So that is not something that I expect to make any difference whatsoever. In fact, I feel like we're getting into a greater cadence of delivering, and whether or not that means as many commits, I can't tell you. But what it's going to mean is that you're receiving deliveries on a regular basis.
Great, thank you. And talking about delivery, then the other regular question: any update on the HoloPort Nanos and when we will ship them? Yeah.
So in our current sprint, we've actually prioritized getting the Nano image to the manufacturer. We used a lot of the learnings from the release of the HoloPort and the HoloPort Plus to basically do some shifts to our auto updates and our authorized process. And that's helping us prepare for the Nano release. But right now we're waiting to hear back from our partners to really understand what might be happening with our manufacturing and production dates and what's possible for that. So we don't have a date for anybody, but we're getting ready to ship that out to those folks. But as soon as we know more, we'll let people know.
Super, thank you. Next question, another one generally bucketed under the marketing or partnerships category that we hear a lot. Are there any talks with enterprise level companies and Holochain Holo? We saw Hedera Hashgraph explode because of news about Google supporting it. Chainlink also. Are there partnership conversations behind closed doors that can have a similar effect for this project? So touching on this a little bit, there are lots of discussions. I think it's really important to make a few things clear. One, as we've said, we focus on tech and building first, and reality is so do enterprise. They want things that have been validated. They want things that have been tested and run many times, different applications. From two, while we're building out the tech, we're really validating like the product market fit. That is, we're focusing on problems that 100% have to be solved on Holochain. And a lot of you out there are saying like, well, it's not tech first, it's relationship first, or is it relationship first and tech first? There are certain problems that are just binary. They cannot be solved with other technology, right? And so our job is to find those problems, make sure that we're solving them technically, and make sure that we're building relationships with people who are desperate to solve those problems with our technology. And then third is, we're supporting a vibrant community of builders, makers, designers, and we want to make the space for them to get involved, feel ownership, recommend. For example, we quote a lot the recent dev camp. Now, somebody who's spent the last 25 years looking at different technology to solve a particular problem comes across Holochain, realizes it can solve the problem, they can also recommend that enterprise use Holochain. In fact, it's oftentimes more powerful. So I think really what I get across in this answer is, yes, there are lots of discussions. Yes, we think there's things that can take Holochain way beyond what Hedera, Hashgraph, and others in this space can do. But we're going to do it in a way that builds a thriving ecosystem around, and we're going to do it in a way that involves all of you. All right, next one. So a friend bought an Indiegogo HoloPort, and we both thought it would be plug and play without a need for a computer or a USB stick. She's not very tech savvy. She only has an iPad. Will there be a way for her to register her HoloPort when she's back from her winter travels in approximately 5 weeks? Mary?
I like the winter travels in 5 weeks. Can I do that? So, the folks who were registering their holoports in the first few days and weeks after the initial receipt and turning on the network, they really had a tougher time. They were encountering a lot of the issues that were in the auto update process on the holoports. And we released several fixes to those. And almost everyone that is now registering is getting through without the need for a monitor, for a keyboard, anything like that. Unfortunately, between the time that we were writing our copy for the Indiegogo and when we got through all of the architectural design and development challenges, we had to make that hard decision, right? To use a USB to create the seeds and to require hosts to connect to another computer. The good news is that, it's really a simple website function and download. So your friend could just borrow another friend's laptop for 5 minutes, and she should be able to save that config file to a USB and not need the computer again. So things are working well, people are getting registered, and it really is just a very short process to get that USB config file ready for your HoloPort. That's what I'd recommend.
Great, thanks, Mary. Yeah, I can confirm that my very non-technical friends have been getting their HoloPorts installed in under 10 minutes. Okay, for Art, how will the reserve accounts affect the price of the HOT token? Is it not fair for early HOT holders or stakeholders to expect solid profits from the success of Holochain and Holo project?
So I think that the first thing to understand about reserve accounts is that the first reserve account is actually going to be a reserve account for HOT. So what that means is that's a way for HOT to actually be able to convert into HoloFuel, to be able to buy HoloFuel with HOT. So since there's a 1-to-1 conversion rate between those things, I don't see that as necessarily having any big effect on the price of HOT. Later reserve accounts, they function very much like stablecoin reserves, right? So it doesn't really matter how many more dollars you put behind Tether. As the supply increases, so do the reserves backing it. It doesn't change the valuation. So if we bring on a dollars or euro reserve, that kind of thing, then it doesn't lower the value of HoloFuel. If anything, it's possible, and this is a totally speculative statement, but it's possible that it could show as a stronger thing for HOT to be able to easily convert to HoloFuel because it's backed by hosting power and different reserves. So, in any case, if there's a concern behind this that that the opening up of HoloFuel and reserve accounts would drive the HOT price down, I don't see that. It's not like it dilutes the supply without increasing the reserves behind it. So very much like a stable coin, it shouldn't affect the value.
Great, thanks. And Art, another one about HoloFuel. Just can you give us some examples of how it might be adopted as a general purpose currency? Who could potentially do so, and how would it benefit them and their end users?
Sure. I think there's a few reasons why somebody would want to use HoloFuel. First thing is because it's backed by real value, by hosting power, which should make it less volatile than other cryptos out there. and make it safer for kind of regular businesses to get into the crypto space. Because right now they have the concern, if I accept payment in a cryptocurrency this week and 2-3 weeks from now I have to pay my rent with this money, has the bottom dropped out and now I can't pay my rent or whatever, right? So it actually is a way of having the currency function in a more stable manner or anti-volatile manner. Another reason is it's performant. It's instantaneous. You don't have to wait 30 or 60 minutes for chain confirmations to know that a transaction is committed. You can get back an immediate signature. You know that you've got it countersigned by the party. So there's performance reasons why you'd want to use HoloFuel. Obviously, if you're building Holo or Holochain stuff, it's easily integrated, right? So that's another reason. And then I think finally, it's super lightweight. Like you can actually run a node and be your own authority in a way that you can't run a blockchain node and be your own authority without that being a very heavy lift. And so I think we can expect that the earliest adopters of using HoloFuel for something other than hosting power are app builders building on Holo or Holochain or Holo hosting that actually have a revenue model where they want to collect fees or payments or subscriptions, and they just want an easy way to do that via a crypto like HoloFuel. And then the next stages of adopters, I don't know yet.
Brilliant, thank you. One of the questions that I guess powers Telegram is the price of any currency. And Art, a little while back, you said in a comment that you believe HoloFuel would stabilize near the $1 mark in a couple of years, given the efficiency of the Holochain architecture. Do you still believe in this statement? And just to validate, there's a link to a Reddit post with you making that comment.
Yeah, actually what I said wasn't that it would stabilize in that window of time, but that if you come back in that period of time and ask if the dollar price was reasonable, but to expect that the expectation might have shifted in that window of time. And I think as everybody knows that this has taken us longer to deliver than we hoped, so we're a little bit behind on this kind of schedule. And again, disclaimer about speculative statements. You can't take any of this as any kind of authority. But part of why the supply is as large as it is, or is set to what it was that we were that in the design of the currency, we were targeting that to stabilize in that range. Stabilize meaning get past initial market fluctuations from everybody figuring out how much faster Holochain is than blockchain, and that there should be like some big changes that happen there, and then changes should slow down once we hit more the true cost of hosting power. So once it's truly backed by the value of the hosting power, and we've decoupled from the speculative cryptocurrency market, so that has to be after the one-to-one hot Holo binding, then I think we can expect to see this kind of behavior. But that's what I designed it for, and I could be totally wrong. We'll see.
Another currency that you've been working on. Could you tell us more about the Jules project you wrote about recently? I'll let you define the acronym as well. How is this project being developed in Holochain? Well, who's on the team? Why did they choose to develop on Holochain? How will it work? And kudos to Art for writing about the degradation of our food and looking for solutions. And would be curious to know what he thinks about raw milk. Okay. I'd also love an update on RedGrid, which I can provide after you've given us some information about Jules and raw milk.
I don't have a lot of firsthand raw milk experience. I think I've had it once or twice, but not enough to have any strong opinion about it. Except that I think it's sort of silly that it's illegal to sell unless you have ownership in the cow or blah, blah, blah. That's all very silly if you ask me. But the Jules currency, the Just One Organics living economic system, Jules being a triple pun here of the Just One Organics thing, the energy unit of joules, because this is a food-backed currency, and food and energy is embodied in food, right? But also the Just One Organics production system, what they do is they take fresh organic food, and they actually are able to take a bunch from the waste chain that might otherwise not make it to shelves and to consumers. And they're able to take some of that and turn it into a premium product that looks like little jewels, like little crystals, right? So there's that third meaning of jewel in there. So there's a bunch of ways that ends up affecting the food system by creating some slack in it, a little bit more margin for the farmers and stuff, which is pretty awesome. But who's on the team? That's David Rose and Fernando Ibarra, and he has a whole staff and team they have a production facility in Oregon, in Klamath Falls, Oregon. And you can find out more info at justoneorganics.com. And one of the reasons that they're really into this as a platform or approach is because having a food-backed currency maps well to how we've set up HoloFuel as a hosting-backed currency. You can have a living supply that actually changes with the capacity of the network. And it's a very good mapping there. And it's really a part of a suite of solutions that we want to do, or maybe I should say that I want to do, of having like energy-backed, food-backed, transportation-backed, housing-backed, hosting-backed, right? Like a suite of currencies backed by real human needs that can really provide a foundation for building an economy on these kinds of cryptocurrencies.
Awesome, super art. Just give a quick update on RedGrid, and I know we're out of time, so rattle through some things. So I had Adam from RedGrid sent me a nice voice message today with a bit of an update. So they're deep into code development, building on Holochain. The reason for them: secure, private, stable, and scalable infrastructure. They've been continuing to raise investment, so this time from a large property developer, and quite interesting because the property developer and discussions with retailers are about providing physical products into the property and retail market. And this is kind of why one of the reasons I was answering the question before is like, it's not just for us as the core team to move into enterprise or exciting partnerships. We can see amazing things that the RedGrid team, and they're one of a number of teams that are working in this way to be able to build deep relationships across the world. So really exciting in terms of property and retail in Australia. They're also deeply involved in the net zero emissions smart city. So their CTO and lead engineer are working there a day or two a week. And they're putting together a DHT for that group to transact effectively. So also spreading the Holochain message out there. A couple of other quick things. So just a quick question around contact and progress with Holochain for next generation internet projects. Yes, we're in touch with some of the Horizon people that are sponsoring the Next Generation Internet Initiative, and in touch with some of the projects trying for funding there. So they'll just close that one off. And then in terms of hApps, do we expect to be in the store for launch? And will the current installed network of HoloPorts be able to support the demand for those applications? Our goal when the network is launching is that we'll have 100 hosted apps, some in mainnet and some in testnet, but some won't fully need HoloFuel. And we believe the network of hosts at the launch will support that. And if not, there are great incentives, as in the HoloFuel currency, for the host network to grow fast. Before I close off, Mary or Art, is there anything that you wanted to say?
I just wanted to appreciate everybody who's out there working to test and give feedback to surveys, do user experience, work with us. The team, the community has been amazing. Every time we've asked for support, people are stepping up to do things with us and get us the feedback that we need to be able to make the products better and better. So thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you're doing.
Anything else? Otherwise, I'll remind some people about some events.
No, it's great to have such an active, engaged community asking good questions. And, you know, like the questions don't only get asked on the AMA. The forum, you know, has an ongoing stream of these things. And yeah, just want to encourage more.
Brilliant. Yeah, I completely agree. Each week, each AMA, I am really impressed by the breadth and the depth and the care in all of the questions. So thank you very much, everyone out there, for that. There are, as I said at the start, about 20 upcoming meetups and events planned in March and April. So go to our website, holo.host/events, if you'd like to find out about those. We encourage you to visit the Holo Host website, to follow us on Twitter to learn more about what we do, to check out our forum at forum.holochain.org, where there are resources readily available to help you build your first Holochain application. And as I said at the start, just for all of you who are involved, thank you so much, and please keep getting involved. There's so much great stuff coming, so we really appreciate everyone out there. Thank you.